Land acknowledgements, do's and don'ts.
Hello everybody, my name's John Smith. I'm here to do the land acknowledgement. I guess I got signed up. If anybody wants to come down that's Indigenous and do the land acknowledgement, they can, but I'm going to start.
Don't. Offload responsibility to Indigenous people you are not connected to. What is said should differ depending on your positionality, but tasking Indigenous people of doing all the labor is taking without giving first.
My name is John Smith. I'm going to be leading today's land acknowledgement. I know that sometimes these events can come off as a little bit performative, and it's taken me a while to reflect on my own background as a non-Indigenous person in Canada to really understand what these things do. But I'm going to invite everybody to reflect a little bit on why we do land acknowledgements and what it means to be on land that is still occupied by sovereign Indigenous nations nowadays.
Do. Share reflections on and invite the audience to reflect on positionality. Anyone can deliver a land acknowledgement. Good storytelling brings heart and mind together by encouraging reflection and sharing one's own honest, sincere thoughts.
I will acknowledge the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and then Lenape and Shetna nations who traditionally lands we are gathered upon today.
Don't. Read a script without reflection or admitting a lack of knowledge. Performative land acknowledgements relegate indigeneity as a box to check within institutions. They construct the narrative that these concerns only matter superficially. Reflect on the biases and emotional struggles that might lead to your lack of engagement.
So with that being said, we acknowledge the Anishinaabe. So that's the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. Haudenosaunee, that's people from Oneida First Nation. And Lenape, which is people also from the Muncie, Delaware area, as well as Chinatown people, whose traditional lands that we are currently gathered upon today. So these are represented not just within Indigenous communities in reserves, but also within urban Indigenous people living on this land, potentially in your neighborhood, in this room with us right now. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the history behind that.
Do. Acknowledge harms but also tell stories of Indigenous agency by highlighting resistance and contemporary thinkers. Storytelling is never objective, but it builds relationships. Use your moment in this position to connect your audience with Indigenous voices.
As Canadians, we have to recognize our past and the oppressive nature that we held upon Indigenous communities, like residential schools and just the oppressive violence that we committed to these communities.
Don't. Take away agency by only highlighting negatives and framing Indigenous people only as victims. Colonial storytelling thrives by mythologizing the Indigenous past and treating them as historical relics.
Also reflect on Canada's history of colonial violence, of Indigenous slavery prior to abolition, to the legacy of residential schools that has split apart communities, and the ongoing colonial violence that we see with the disparities in healthcare, life expectancy, and life outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. With that being said, we should also acknowledge the resistance and resurgence that has been done by Indigenous peoples throughout the centuries in order to endure until this day. I invite you to read people from the likes of Leanne Simpson or Kyle White to get an idea of what a land acknowledgement is from Indigenous thought. So it's great that we're talking about these things here, but I also want to pass the baton to Indigenous thinkers in order.
Do. Acknowledge harms but also tell stories of Indigenous agency by highlighting resistance and contemporary thinkers. Storytelling is never objective, but it builds relationships. Use your moment in this position to connect your audience with Indigenous voices. Land acknowledgements tell stories about who Indigenous and non-Indigenous people are. Make sure the story that you tell demonstrates respect, responsibility, and reciprocity.